Ben stood near the kitchen window, his hands shaking slightly as he stared down at his phone. The house was finally quiet after hours of meetings, lawyers, and nonstop phone calls. Tom noticed immediately. "You okay?" Tom asked carefully. Ben rubbed his forehead. "No, not really." Tom walked closer. "What happened?" Ben looked stressed as he called Tom over to the table. He lowered his voice. "Tom, the other patients' families don't want them to come out." Tom blinked. "Why?" Ben let out a long breath. "They said they put their family member in a home for a reason." The room went silent. Tom stared at him in disbelief. "They actually said that?" Ben nodded slowly. "Some of them were angry I even contacted them. One family told me their son ruined their lives before the group home. Another said their daughter is safer away from the family." Tom shook his head. "That's messed up." Ben sat down heavily in the chair. "Not every case is abuse, Tom. Some families are overwhelmed, some are scared, some gave up years ago and don't know how to face them again." Tom crossed his arms. "Still doesn't mean you stop caring." "I know that," Ben snapped before calming himself down. "But you didn't hear the calls. One mother cried the whole time, said she loved her son but couldn't survive what was happening at home anymore." Tom's anger faded a little. Ben continued quietly. "Another father told me, the home can handle him better than we ever could." Tom leaned against the counter. "So what now?" Ben looked exhausted. "Now I have residents asking why nobody visits them," he swallowed hard, "and I don't know what to tell them." At that moment, Jeffrey rolled into the kitchen in his wheelchair after overhearing part of the conversation. "So some families just quit?" Jeffrey asked softly. Ben looked at him carefully. "It's complicated." Jeffrey shook his head. "No, maybe for adults it is, but for the people living there, it probably feels simple." Tom looked over. "What do you mean?" Jeffrey stared at the floor. "It probably feels like they weren't worth fighting for." Nobody spoke after that. Ben's eyes watered slightly because deep down, he knew Jeffrey understood that feeling better than anyone in the room. Ben's phone rang again before anyone could respond to Jeffrey. He looked at the screen and sighed heavily. Tom noticed another family. Ben nodded slowly before answering. "Hello, this is Ben." A tired man's voice came through the speaker almost immediately. "Yeah, I got your message about my daughter." Ben sat straighter. "Thank you for calling me back, sir." The man sounded exhausted, like he had not slept properly in years. "I'll make this simple," the father said. "Whatever you do, my kid needs to stay in there for everybody's safety, including her own." Tom's face tightened. Ben stayed calm. "Can you explain what's been happening?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then the man finally spoke again. "You don't understand what it was like before the home." His voice cracked slightly. "We tried everything: hospitals, therapy, in-home care, medications, lock alarms, cameras, everything." Ben listened quietly. The father continued. "My wife used to sleep with the bedroom door locked because our daughter would wander the house at night during episodes. One time she almost turned the stove on while everyone was asleep." Tom's expression softened a little. "She attacked her older brother twice," the father admitted. "Not because she's evil, she just loses control sometimes, and after it's over she cries harder than anybody." Ben rubbed his temple gently. "We love her," the man said quickly, almost defensively. "People always think parents like us are monsters, but they didn't live it." Jeffrey stayed silent in the doorway, listening carefully. The father kept talking. "The home gave her structure, staff that know how to handle things safely. She actually smiles there sometimes." His voice broke again. "At home, everybody was drowning." Ben spoke carefully. "I'm not trying to force reunification. I just wanted to understand the situation better." The man exhaled shakily. "Then understand this," he said. "Sometimes loving somebody means admitting you can't do it alone." The call ended a few moments later. The kitchen stayed quiet afterward. Tom finally looked at Ben. "I hate that, but I also kinda get it." Ben nodded slowly. "That's the hard part, sometimes there isn't a villain." Jeffrey looked down at his wheelchair controls quietly. "Still hurts for the people inside though," he whispered. Ben sat quietly for a moment after the call ended, staring at the dark phone screen in his hand. "What now?" Ben finally asked. Tom leaned back against the counter and folded his arms, thinking carefully before speaking. Jeffrey just needs hygiene help and eating care, Tom said gently. Sam too, yeah, they need support, but it's different. Jeffrey stayed quiet, listening. Tom continued, these other people, some of them need way more than these families can give. Ben nodded slowly. Some need 24-hour supervision, Tom added. Medical care, behavioral specialists, safety plans, trained staff, he sighed. That's not something every parent can handle alone. Jeffrey looked uncomfortable hearing it said out loud. Tom noticed immediately. I'm not saying they should be abandoned, Tom said carefully toward him. I'm saying there's a difference between needing help and needing an entire system around you to stay safe. Ben rubbed his eyes tiredly. The problem, Ben muttered, is that some residents hear care facility and feel protected, while others hear it and feel thrown away. Nobody argued with that. Sam slowly entered the kitchen from the hallway after overhearing part of the conversation. So what happens to them? Sam asked quietly. Ben looked at him honestly. For some families, the home becomes part of the family support system, he explained. Visits, calls, holidays together, the resident still feels connected. And the others? Sam asked. Ben's face fell slightly. The others stop getting visitors. The silence afterward felt heavy. Jeffrey finally spoke. That's the part people remember, he said softly. Not the nurses, not the therapy, not the food. He swallowed hard. They remember who kept showing up and who didn't. Tom looked down at the floor because nobody in the room could really argue with that either. Jeffrey looked up slowly, his voice quieter than before. When we was there, people that lived in New Jersey, he shook his head. We never seen nobody have a visitor at all for 2 months since me and Sam was there. Tom looked stunned. Sam nodded sadly. Yeah, Sam said, Georgia isn't close, but people that was from New Jersey, no one showed up, not even a card. Ben's expression dropped. Sam leaned against the wall, remembering it clearly. One guy told me his sister dropped him off 3 years ago, Sam continued. She lived a block away, he swallowed hard, but she never visited. The room became painfully quiet. Jeffrey stared at the floor. At first, he said softly, every time those doors opened, he thought maybe it was her. Sam nodded slowly. First week, he would fix his shirt and hair whenever somebody walked in, Sam added. Second week, he kept asking staff if there was mail. Jeffrey's hands tightened slightly. After the third time those doors opened, he whispered, the guy gave up hope. Nobody in the kitchen knew what to say after that. Ben sat down heavily in the chair. That's the damage people don't see, Ben admitted quietly, not just medical stuff, emotional abandonment. Tom rubbed his face slowly. And once somebody stops helping, Tom muttered, that's hard to bring back. Sam looked toward the hallway like he was back inside the facility again. You could tell who still had hope, he said quietly. They listened for footsteps, they watched the front door, they asked staff if mail came. Jeffrey nodded. And the ones that lost hope, Tom asked carefully. Jeffrey answered almost immediately. They stopped asking. Jeffrey shifted in his chair, his voice quieter now, like he was remembering something he didn't talk about much. The staff was kind of cold to them, he said. They did routines like daily care, PT, OT, everything was structured. Tom frowned slightly, cold how? Jeffrey shrugged, not mean, just distant, like it was a job, not personal. Sam nodded slowly from the doorway. Yeah, I seen that too. Jeffrey looked down at his hands. But even though they were like that, he continued, the residents still got attached to them. Ben looked up, how do you mean? Jeffrey thought for a moment. Because they were there every day, he said simply. Same faces, same voices, even if it was just time for meds or let's go to therapy, it was still somebody showing up. Tom leaned back exhaling. So the staff didn't have to be warm, Tom said quietly. They just had to be consistent. Jeffrey nodded, yeah. Sam added softly, some of them would wait by the hall just to see a certain staff member walk past, even if they only said like 2 words to them. Ben frowned, that's attachment. Jeffrey didn't disagree. It's what happens when you don't have much else, he said. You start holding on to whoever is there, even if it's just routine care. Tom glanced at him. That can't be easy for staff either. Jeffrey gave a small tired shrug. Some of them handled it, he said. Some didn't. A few of the staff you could tell they cared more than they were supposed to. Sam nodded, yeah, and the residents noticed that immediately. Ben sat back slowly, absorbing it all. So even in a place that feels cold, he said, people still find connection. Jeffrey looked up at him. Yeah, he said quietly, because showing up every day still counts as something. Sam shifted a little, voice lower than usual. Jeffrey and I wasn't there long, he said, but even in that time we ended up doing the same thing as everyone else, even at night. Tom looked over. What do you mean? Sam hesitated, then explained. I was on the girls' side and Jeffy was on the boys' side. Jeffrey nodded quietly from his chair. Tom frowned. Because of the bottom surgery situation, right? They had to place you differently. Sam gave a small nod. Yeah. Ben's face tightened immediately. I'm sorry again about that. I still regret how that was handled. The room went still for a second. Sam looked at him, calm but honest. I'm okay with it now, he said, but thanks. Ben didn't let it go that easily, his voice softer. It still shouldn't have been confusing or uncomfortable for you. Sam shrugged slightly. It was at first, but after a while it was just life there, you adapt. Jeffrey leaned forward a bit. Honestly, Jeffrey added, once you're in a place like that, labels and sides and all that, it stops mattering as much as people think it does. It's just routines, staff, meals, therapy, sleep. Tom exhaled slowly. Still sounds like it messes with you. Sam nodded, yeah, but not always in the way people expect. A quiet pause followed. Ben rubbed his hands together, clearly thinking. I wish I could say I got everything right, he admitted. But I didn't. I just tried to keep people safe with what I knew at the time. Jeffrey looked at him, not angry, just tired. Most places do, he said. Try their best, it just doesn't always feel like enough when you're the one living it. Nobody had an easy answer to that. Sam lowered his voice, looking at the floor. Ben, do you remember when I got overwhelmed too much and I regressed? Ben nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. Sam took a breath. Jeffrey tried to talk with me, but for some reason I went mute again for like 2 days. Jeffrey's expression changed immediately. I thought you were mad at me. Sam shook his head quickly. No, it wasn't that. He paused, searching for the right words. It was like my brain just shut off. I could hear you, I could see you, but I couldn't get anything out. I didn't even know how to explain it. The room went quiet for a moment. Jeffrey looked down. I kept thinking I did something wrong. Ben stepped in gently. Jeffrey, that wasn't on you. That sounds like overload, shutdown. Jeffrey nodded slowly, still a bit tense. I just didn't want him to think I ignored him. Sam finally looked up at him. I didn't think that, Sam said quietly. I just couldn't respond, and then the longer it went, the harder it got. Tom leaned against the counter, listening carefully. That happens sometimes, Tom said. Once someone locks up like that, pressure makes it worse, not better. Jeffrey exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I wish I knew that then, he said. Sam gave a small shrug. Me too, but after a while I came back and you were still there. Jeffrey looked at him. Yeah. Sam nodded. Yeah, that helped more than anything. Ben watched the two of them quietly. That's the part people don't always understand, he said. Even when communication breaks down, presence still matters. The room stayed calm after that, but in a different way, less heavy than before. Ben's expression changed immediately, like something had clicked in his mind. They didn't give you a letter board or a notepad and pen, he asked. Sam shook his head. No. The room went quiet. Tom looked up sharply. Wait, not even basic communication tools. Sam shrugged a little, but there was frustration behind it. Not for me at that time. Jeffrey shifted in his chair. They had some stuff on the unit, but it wasn't always available, and sometimes staff didn't bring it unless you asked the right way or the right person was on shift. Ben rubbed his face slowly. That's not okay. Sam looked down at his hands. When I went mute, I couldn't explain anything. I couldn't ask for water or say I was overwhelmed or anything. Jeffrey nodded quietly. Yeah, I remember that part. People think it's just silence, but it's not. It's like being stuck. Tom frowned. So how did you get through it? Sam paused. Mostly guessing, he said honestly. Staff would check in, Jeffrey would try to sit with me, I just followed what everyone else was doing. Jeffrey added softly, you could tell when someone was in shutdown, their whole body changes. They go quiet, but it's not peaceful quiet. Ben exhaled slowly, clearly bothered. You should have had a way to communicate, even something simple. Sam gave a small nod. Yeah, it would have helped. Jeffrey looked at Ben. It wasn't always about comfort there, sometimes it was just containment and routine. That word sat heavy in the room. Tom broke the silence. Still, basic communication shouldn't be optional. Ben nodded once, agreed. Sam finally looked up. I'm okay now, but in that moment I felt like I disappeared. Nobody argued with him. Because everyone in the room understood exactly what he meant. Sam's voice dropped a little as he continued. Lucky for me it was only for 2 days, he said, but half of them they can't talk at all. Tom frowned, what do you mean permanently? Sam nodded, yeah, some had speech devices. Jeffrey looked up slightly, AAC devices. Yeah, Sam said, those. He hesitated before continuing. But they didn't take them out with them sometimes, and the staff, they never took them out for them. The kitchen went still. Ben's expression tightened, what do you mean they didn't take them out? Sam shrugged, but it wasn't casual, it was frustrated. Like they had them but they stayed in rooms, locked away, or only used during certain hours, and if a staff member was busy they'd just say not now. Tom shook his head slowly, that's not how that's supposed to work. Jeffrey spoke quietly, if someone relies on a device to talk it's not a convenience, it's their voice. Sam nodded, exactly. He looked down at his hands again. There was a guy who used one, really smart, funny too, but if his device wasn't charged or wasn't brought to him he just sat there, you could see him trying to talk without it but nothing came out. Ben leaned forward slightly, did staff realize what that did to him? Sam exhaled, some did, some didn't care, and some just said they were too busy with meds or meals or rounds. Jeffrey's jaw tightened, that's how people get forgotten in places like that. Tom added quietly, not on purpose, but it still happens. Ben rubbed his forehead, this is exactly why systems need consistency. Communication tools are not optional equipment. Sam looked up at him. I think the residents understood that more than the staff sometimes, he said. Jeffrey nodded once, because when your voice depends on something you don't forget it, ever. The room fell quiet again, heavier than before, but clearer now, like everyone could see what Sam was describing a little more sharply than before. Jeffrey's voice got quieter, more serious as he spoke. Some of the guys that needed the AAC devices, he said, they were having meltdowns and they didn't have them. Tom frowned immediately, so they couldn't communicate at all. Jeffrey shook his head, not properly, just frustration, panic, you could see it building. Sam nodded slowly, yeah, I remember that. Jeffrey continued, and instead of getting the device or helping them communicate another way, staff would just put them in bed. Ben's face tightened, just put them to bed. Yeah, Jeffrey said, like rest time or calm down time. Tom looked uncomfortable, but if they're in meltdown that doesn't fix the cause. Jeffrey nodded, it doesn't, it just stops the noise for a while. Sam added quietly, some of them weren't even angry, they were just stuck, like trapped inside their own head with no way out. The room went still for a moment. Ben leaned forward, that's not behavior, that's communication failure. Yeah. Jeffrey looked at him, that's what it felt like from inside, like you're trying everything to say something but nobody can hear you and then you get told to lie down. Tom exhaled slowly, that would make anyone worse over time. Sam looked down, some people stopped trying after a while. Jeffrey nodded once, yeah, because if trying doesn't get your voice back you start giving up on trying. Ben's tone softened, did any staff try to fix it properly? Jeffrey thought for a moment, a few, the good ones would stay with them, try to figure it out, calm voice, patience, or find the device if they could. Sam added, you could tell the difference immediately when a good staff member came in, everything changed. Tom crossed his arms, so it depended on who was on shift. Jeffrey gave a small nod, yeah, that was the hardest part, same person different day, completely different outcome. The room went quiet again, heavier, but more grounded in understanding than before. Sam let out a slow breath, staring at the floor. The staff told everyone to go back and watch TV, he said. If someone tried to help a non-speaking person, they'd just put a movie on. Jeffrey nodded immediately, yeah, or put us to bed as well. Tom frowned, wait, if residents were trying to help each other, staff stopped it. Sam shrugged slightly, sometimes not always in a loud way, just redirecting, go watch TV, calm down, back to your room, stuff like that. Jeffrey added quietly, it was like they wanted everything quiet again more than they wanted it understood. Ben stayed still for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. They knew what they were doing. The room shifted. Tom looked at him, what do you mean? Ben didn't raise his voice, but his words were firm. I mean, it becomes routine. If something is hard to manage, you learn ways to control the environment instead of fixing the problem. TV, bed, isolation, distraction, it keeps things stable on the surface. Sam looked up at him, but it didn't feel stable. Ben nodded, no, it wouldn't, because it's not real resolution, it's containment. Jeffrey leaned forward slightly. That's exactly what it felt like everything was about keeping things quiet enough to pass the next shift. Tom shook his head slowly, that sounds like burnout mixed with bad training. Ben replied carefully, maybe. But even then, when you repeatedly see people needing communication support and you respond by removing communication opportunities, that becomes a system problem. Sam went quiet again. Then he said softly, the worst part is some residents started thinking they were the problem. No one spoke right away. Because that part didn't sound like procedure. It sounded like what happens after it. Sam's voice dropped as he remembered it. One guy signed help me to me, he said. Ben straightened immediately, what did you do? Sam swallowed, I went to watch Ms. Rachel. Tom blinked, Ms. Rachel is for Bobby's. Jeffrey gave a small, tired nod, they didn't care. The room went quiet for a second. Ben didn't react with anger, more with concern. Sam, why did you go watch it instead of getting staff? He asked gently. Sam hesitated, then answered honestly. Because that's what everyone did, he said. If you tried to get involved, staff would just redirect you anyway, and after a while you stop thinking you can fix anything. Jeffrey leaned forward slightly, that's real, you learn what you're allowed to do in that place. Tom frowned, so the system basically trained you to step away. Sam nodded slowly, yeah. Ben exhaled through his nose, clearly uncomfortable. Still, he said carefully, someone signing help me shouldn't be ignored. Sam nodded again, quieter this time, I know. Jeffrey looked down, sometimes people used to try helping each other anyway, but it didn't always change what staff did next. Tom crossed his arms, that's the part that doesn't sit right, you're telling me a resident signals distress and the response is distraction? Ben answered honestly. In the best case interpretation, it's staff trying to prevent escalation. In the worst case, it becomes ignoring the actual need. Sam added softly, and from inside you can't tell which one it is. A pause followed. Jeffrey finally said, that guy probably didn't forget asking for help. Sam nodded slowly, I didn't either. The room stayed still after that, the weight of it settling in, but nobody rushed to fill the silence. Sam looked down, voice quieter than before. He only got help after, he paused, swallowing hard, the floor was wet with his urine. Tom's expression changed immediately, what? Jeffrey nodded slowly, like he already knew where the story was going. Sam continued, he kept trying to sign, trying to get someone's attention, but nobody really understood him at first. Staff thought he was just agitated or acting out. Ben's jaw tightened, so it took an accident before anyone realized it was urgent. Sam nodded, yeah. The room went still. Jeffrey added softly, sometimes that's what it took there, not words, not signs, something obvious enough that couldn't be ignored. Tom shook his head, that's not care, that's waiting for things to go wrong. Ben didn't argue. Instead, he spoke carefully, when communication breaks down, the system should compensate, not wait for escalation. Sam looked up slightly, he wasn't trying to be difficult, he said, he was trying everything he could think of. Jeffrey nodded, people forget that part, they think it's behavior, it's not, it's desperation. A long pause followed. Tom exhaled slowly. Did he get better support after that? Sam hesitated. Yeah, he said, but it should have happened before. No one disagreed. Sam's voice went lower, like he didn't really want to repeat it. The staff said, now you're in diapers, let's clean you up, he said, and one of them even said something like, a non-verbal guy isn't in briefs that doesn't make sense. Tom's face tightened immediately. That's not how you talk to someone. Sam nodded, yeah. Jeffrey looked down, jaw clenched. They talked like that a lot. Sam continued, the guy just sat there. Tom frowned, like didn't respond at all. Sam shook his head, yeah, just still. He hesitated. In front of everyone. The room went quiet for a moment. Ben's tone stayed controlled but serious. That kind of language is demeaning. Even if the situation is clinical, you don't strip someone's dignity while you're caring for them. Jeffrey nodded once. After a while, people stop reacting, not because it's okay, but because they've heard worse. Tom rubbed his face slowly, so the staff treated it like routine care, but the way they spoke. Sam cut in softly, made it feel like he wasn't even a person. Silence followed again. Jeffrey finally added, and the worst part is he heard all of it, even if he didn't answer. Sam looked down, yeah. Ben exhaled, no one should be spoken about like that in front of others, ever. No one argued. Because in that moment, everyone understood that the problem wasn't just what happened. It was how often it happened, until nobody even questioned it anymore. Sam hesitated before continuing, his voice tighter. The same staff member came out with a bag with all of the guy's underwear, he said. Tom's expression changed. Wait, why did he have his underwear? Sam swallowed. He told the head nurse Will H is diapers 24/7 now, and the nurse just said, got it. The room went still. Jeffrey looked away, jaw clenched. Yeah, I remember stuff like that happening. Ben's face stayed serious but controlled. Was there any assessment after that, any medical review or support plan update? Sam shook his head slightly, not that we saw. Tom frowned, so it just became a label. Jeffrey nodded slowly. That's how it felt sometimes. Once something happened, it turned into a this is who you are now situation. Sam added quietly, he didn't argue, he just sat there. Ben exhaled slowly. Incontinence care can be part of support needs, but it should never erase dignity or identity, and it should always be reassessed properly. Tom crossed his arms. It sounds like decisions were being made fast, but not necessarily carefully. Jeffrey looked down. When you're in there, you don't really get to see the decisions being made, you just feel the outcome. A pause settled over the room. Sam finally said, after that, people started treating him differently, like he couldn't be anything else. No one rushed to respond. Because that part wasn't about one moment anymore. It was about how quickly someone's whole identity could shrink inside a system that stopped seeing the person first. Sam's voice stayed low. When the nurse pushed Will H back into the TV area, he said, he acted like nothing happened. Tom frowned. What do you mean, acted like nothing happened? Sam explained, he just sat there. Not looking around, just staring at the TV, like it didn't matter where he was anymore. Jeffrey nodded slowly, yeah, that shutdown look. Ben stayed quiet for a moment, then asked carefully, was he calm or just withdrawn? Sam thought about it, not calm, just gone a bit, like he stopped reacting. Tom shifted uncomfortably, that's not recovery, that's coping by shutting down. Jeffrey added quietly, people do that after a while, when reacting doesn't change anything, you stop reacting. Sam nodded, even when staff walked past him, he didn't turn his head. Ben rubbed his hands together, thinking, that's a significant sign of distress or disengagement, it shouldn't be ignored. Jeffrey looked at him. Sometimes it was noticed, but most of the time the routine kept going. Tom sighed, so the TV room wasn't really calming, it was just where people were placed. Sam glanced up. Yeah, it was just where things got quiet. A pause followed. Jeffrey said softly, he used to look around before that. After a while he stopped. No one responded immediately. Because everyone understood what that kind of change usually meant, even if nobody said it out loud. Tom leaned back, shaking his head slowly. Sounds like Will H was the one independent guy, he said. He was alert enough to let someone know he needed the bathroom, but once his AAC device wasn't on him, he couldn't communicate it anymore. Sam nodded quietly. Yeah, that's what it turned into. Tom's brow furrowed, and then the nurses took it away from him. Jeffrey looked down. That's what it felt like from the outside sometimes, like access came and went depending on shifts or situations. Sam added once he couldn't use it, he stopped trying to tell people. There wasn't another way that worked fast enough. Ben's expression tightened. If an AAC device is required for communication, removing it without a safe alternative effectively removes the person's voice. That's extremely serious. The room went quiet for a moment. Tom exhaled, so he went from being able to ask to not being able to ask at all. Sam nodded, yeah. Jeffrey added softly, and once that happens, people start assuming you don't need anything instead of realizing you just can't say it. Ben looked between them. Was there any backup system, writing, gestures, anything consistent? Sam shook his head slightly. Not really consistent, it depended on who was working. Tom rubbed his face. That's a system failure, not an individual moment. Jeffrey agreed quietly. That's what a lot of it was. A pause settled again. Sam said, after a while we'll just stayed in the TV room more, less asking, less moving. No one interrupted. Because everyone could understand what came next without needing it spelled out. Sam exhaled slowly. After all that, he said, the nurse tried to feed him, but he didn't want the food. Tom frowned. He refused to eat. Sam nodded, yeah, or he just wouldn't respond. Jeffrey added quietly, that happens sometimes after stuff like that, people just shut down. Sam continued, within 24 hours he got a G-tube. The room went still. Tom looked surprised. That fast? Ben's expression tightened. That's a significant medical escalation. Sam shrugged slightly. That's what happened. Tom leaned forward thinking, sounds like after Will H's accident he just gave up from embarrassment. Jeffrey looked down. It looked like that from the outside, yeah. Sam shook his head a little. It wasn't just embarrassment though, it was like everything stacked up. Not being heard, not being understood, things getting taken away. Then that moment happened. Ben spoke carefully. Loss of communication plus loss of control over basic needs can lead to withdrawal. Refusing food is sometimes part of that response. Tom nodded slowly, so it wasn't one thing, it was everything building up. Jeffrey added softly, and once people stop eating, staff have to act fast for safety. That's why things escalate quickly. Sam looked down. After that, he didn't really come back to the TV room the same way. A pause followed. Ben finally said, whatever the reasons were, that's a person who went through a very rapid and serious decline. No one disagreed. Because everyone in the room understood that what they were describing wasn't just an incident. It was a chain of moments that changed someone's entire life in less than a day. Jeffrey sat still for a moment, then spoke quietly. He was just there, he said. Even the good staff, he was quiet. Sam nodded slowly, like he knew exactly what Jeffrey meant. Sam then added, Jim asked me about it, I told him to report it. Tom looked up, report what? Sam exhaled, what was happening, the situation with Will H and the way things were being handled. He paused before continuing. But Jim told me if a resident sees it then it can't be reported, only other staff can report staff. Tom frowned immediately, that doesn't make sense. Sam shrugged slightly. He said it was because one time someone lied, so now staff can only report other staff, that's what he told me. The room went quiet. Ben's expression tightened. That kind of rule, if it's real or informal, creates a serious accountability gap. Jeffrey looked down, yeah, because residents see everything. Tom crossed his arms, so basically the people most affected can't officially say what they see. Sam nodded, that's what it felt like. A pause followed. Ben spoke carefully. Even if there was a past incident where someone lied, removing resident reporting entirely isn't a solution. It just silences information. Jeffrey added quietly, and in places like that, silence already happens a lot naturally. Sam looked down at his hands. That's why I told him anyway, I didn't want it to just disappear. Tom exhaled slowly. Sounds like the system made it harder to speak up, not easier. No one disagreed, because by now, everyone in the room understood the same thing. When the people living inside a place are the ones who see the problems but aren't allowed to formally report them, the truth doesn't go away. It just gets quieter. Jeffrey stared at the floor for a few seconds before speaking again. A day after that, Will H. went on a bus. Tom looked confused. A bus? Jeffrey nodded slowly. Yeah, staff packed a bag, medical papers too. Sam's expression dropped slightly. Nobody really explained much to the residents. Ben already seemed to understand where the conversation was going. Jeffrey looked at him carefully. Uncle Ben. Ben sighed softly before Jeffrey could even finish the question. Jeffrey, Ben said gently, before you ask, no, you and Sam were the first ones I sent to the UK. The room went quiet. Jeffrey blinked, so Will wasn't. No, Ben interrupted softly, not overseas. Sam looked up, then where did he go? Ben hesitated for a moment before answering carefully. Higher medical support. Tom frowned slightly, because of the feeding tube. Ben nodded, partly, but also because his care needs changed fast. Once someone needs more specialized monitoring, facilities sometimes transfer them. Jeffrey stayed quiet. Did he know? He finally asked. Ben looked down for a second. I honestly don't know. That answer hit harder than anyone expected. Sam leaned against the wall silently. Jeffrey swallowed. One day he was in the TV room, he said softly, then he was gone. Nobody interrupted him. Jeffrey continued quietly, that happened a lot there. People disappeared to hospitals, new units, different homes. He looked down at his hands. Sometimes nobody even told the residents what happened. Tom exhaled slowly, that messes with people. Sam nodded, especially when you already scared you might be next. Ben looked between them carefully. That fear is real, he admitted. In systems like that, transfers can feel sudden and confusing to residents. Jeffrey looked up slightly. I kept wondering if he ever got his AAC device back. The room fell silent again. Because nobody there actually knew the answer. The room had gone so quiet that nobody noticed the man standing near the doorway until he finally spoke. My bad for eavesdropping, he said carefully, but Will H. is my son. Everyone turned toward him. Sam blinked in shock, your son. The man slowly pulled out his phone and opened a picture. Sam looked immediately, yeah, that's him. The father nodded once, holding the phone tightly in his hand. We only put him there for a week, he said. My family never trusted that place completely. Ben stood up slowly, sir, I. The man held up a hand gently. No, I'm not here screaming at anybody, I'm trying to understand. Tom stayed quiet, letting him talk. The father looked down at the picture again. He wanted to try being independent, the man explained. He told me himself, said he didn't want us hovering over him forever. Sam listened carefully. The father continued, voice getting rougher. So we tried, we thought maybe a group home would help him learn more independence with support around him. Jeffrey looked down. But hearing all this, the man said, glancing around the room, hearing half of what y'all said and imagining the other half. He stopped speaking for a moment and quickly typed on his phone. Sam quietly asked, what are you doing? The man looked up. Texting my wife, he said, telling her we're removing him from the group home he's in now. The room froze. Ben's expression changed immediately. Sir, I need to say something carefully before you make a decision that fast. The father looked at him but didn't interrupt. Not every home is the same, Ben said calmly. Some are undertrained, some are overwhelmed, some are excellent. If your son is safe where he is now, don't make the decision from fear alone. The father's eyes watered slightly. I know, he admitted, but if my son was sitting there asking for help and nobody listened, his voice cracked. I can't ignore hearing that. Sam looked down quietly. Jeffrey finally spoke. Your son still wanted independence, he said softly. Don't take that part away from him either. The father looked at Jeffrey for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right, he whispered. I just need to make sure independence doesn't turn into abandonment. The man took a slow breath. My name's Todd, he said quietly. He looked down at his phone for a second, then back up at the room. I'm gonna FaceTime him. Sam looked nervous immediately. right now. Todd nodded, yeah. A few seconds later, the phone connected. Will H appeared on the screen sitting in what looked like a quieter room than the one Sam and Jeffrey remembered. His AAC device rested beside him. Todd gave a small smile, hey buddy. Will glanced at the screen and typed something into his device. What? Todd hesitated before answering carefully. Sam and Jeffrey from the group home were talking. Will's expression changed slightly. His fingers moved across the device quickly. I don't know them. The room went still. Todd frowned softly, Will. The device spoke again. I got go. Then another sentence appeared. Tell them if you didn't talk to me, then they can't talk about me now. The voice from the device sounded flat and electronic, but the meaning hit hard anyway. Sam immediately looked down. Jeffrey stayed very still. Todd spoke softly toward the phone, okay, I hear you. Will typed one more thing. I don't want pity. Then the call disconnected. Silence filled the kitchen. Tom exhaled slowly, damn. Sam rubbed his hands together nervously, we wasn't trying to hurt him. Jeffrey nodded quietly, we just remembered him. Todd sat down heavily. I think, he said carefully, he spent so much time being talked about by staff, doctors, systems, everybody, he swallowed. Now he wants control over his own story. Ben nodded slowly, that makes sense. Sam looked guilty, maybe we should have stopped saying his name. Todd shook his head gently. No, he said, you remembered he was a person, that matters too. Jeffrey stared at the dark phone screen on the table. But he's right about one thing, Jeffrey admitted quietly, we never really got to know him, not really. Nobody argued with that. Because for all the time they spent in the same building, most of them had only ever seen pieces of each other between routines, staff shifts, therapy schedules, and survival. Todd stared at the dark phone screen for a second longer before giving a small, emotional laugh. He's stubborn like his mom, Todd said quietly. The tension in the room eased just a little. Tom smiled faintly, yeah, I kinda got that impression. Todd nodded, once he decides something, that's it, even as a kid. He shook his head fondly. If he thought somebody was talking for him instead of to him, he'd shut the whole conversation down. Sam looked guilty still, I didn't mean it like that. I know, Todd said gently, and honestly, hearing you guys remember him means more than you probably realize. Jeffrey looked up slightly, even after what he said. Todd nodded. He answered, didn't he? Todd replied, that means he cared enough to respond. Ben leaned back quietly, letting Todd speak. Todd smiled faintly again. When he was younger, people used to talk around him all the time because of the AAC device. Teachers, doctors, therapists, he sighed. One day he typed, I'm literally right here. Tom let out a short laugh despite everything. That sounds exactly like what just happened, Tom said. Todd chuckled softly, yep. Sam finally smiled a little too. Todd's expression softened afterward. He fought hard to be treated like a regular person, he said. Not a diagnosis, not a room number, not the nonverbal guy, just Will. Jeffrey nodded slowly. We should have said that more, he admitted quietly. Todd looked at him kindly. The fact you remember him at all, Todd said, that already means he wasn't invisible. Todd's phone buzzed again. He looked down and smiled almost immediately. What? Tom asked. Todd turned the phone slightly so everyone could see the screen. Well, it sent another AC-generated message. Dad, Mom want bread on your way home. And tell those two guys I remember them as well. Thanks. P.S. Sam, get a hobby for yourself. For the first time all night, the room actually laughed. Sam looked offended for half a second. What's that supposed to mean? Jeffrey started laughing harder. Nah, that definitely sounds like him. Todd grinned, yep, that's Will. Even Ben cracked a smile. Tom shook his head. Dude disappears dramatically, comes back and immediately roasts Sam. Sam pointed toward the phone, I was trying to be nice. Todd laughed softly, that probably is him being nice. Jeffrey wiped his eyes, still laughing quietly. I'm kinda glad he's still sarcastic, Jeffrey admitted. Todd's smile softened after that. Me too, he said quietly, means he's still himself. The heaviness in the room didn't fully disappear, but for the first time in hours, it loosened enough for everybody to breathe again. Will's phone lit up again a moment later. Todd glanced down at it, then hesitated before reading it out loud. Will had typed, P.S. Jeffrey, I glad that I can't hear you cry every night anymore. The room went completely still. Sam's smile faded immediately. Oh. Jeffrey didn't move at first, his eyes dropped to the floor. Tom looked between them, confused and uncomfortable. What does he mean by that? Jeffrey's voice came out quiet. I used to cry at night there. He swallowed. I didn't think anyone heard it. Ben exhaled slowly, choosing his words carefully. In places like that, sound carries, people notice more than you think. Jeffrey nodded slightly. I wasn't trying to make it someone's problem, I just couldn't hold it in. Sam shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know it was that bad for you. Jeffrey gave a small shrug. It wasn't every night, just when it built up. Todd lowered the phone a little, frowning at the message. He probably meant it in his own way. Jeffrey nodded again, a bit slower this time. Yeah, I don't think he's mad, he just noticed. Tom leaned back. That's actually kind of heavy for him to say so casually. Ben agreed. It shows awareness, maybe even empathy in a blunt way. Sam looked down at his hands, still weird hearing it like that. Jeffrey let out a short breath. It's fine. But his voice didn't fully match his words. Todd finally spoke gently. I think what he's saying is he's glad things are quieter for you now. Jeffrey didn't answer right away. Then he nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly, me too. Todd typed slowly, holding the phone a little tighter. He sent. Do you mean, if you could help Jeffrey you would? A moment passed. Then Will replied. Yes, I just wanted Jeffrey to know. Todd read it out and nodded softly. Okay, he said. Sam let out a quiet breath he didn't realize he was holding. That's actually kinda nice. Jeffrey looked at the phone, still a bit unsure how to feel. He didn't have to say that, Jeffrey muttered. Tom leaned on the counter. Yeah, but he did. Ben nodded slowly. Sometimes people communicate care in very direct ways, not always gentle but honest. Todd looked between them, then typed again. He sent. Thanks, Jeffrey hears you. Will responded quickly. Good. That was it. Short, simple. But somehow it landed differently this time. Jeffrey exhaled and gave a small nod. Yeah, he said quietly, I hear him too.